Running with diabetes is a big challenge. Welcome back to another episode of Running Your Best Life. I'm Victor, your host, and with me, as always, my incredible co host, Adele. Today, we have an inspiring guest, someone I've known for about 8 years since our days in Toastmasters. He's not just a runner, but an advocate, an endurance athlete, someone proving that type 1 diabetes is no barrier to chasing big goals. Sam, Jones, Sam Johnson was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2009, but that didn't stop him from taking on endurance challenges. He's completed multiple half marathons and is now training with me for his first full marathon. Not only that, but he's also the advocate for team chair for the Breakthrough Type 1 Diabetes in Eastern Washington, working to spread awareness and fight for progress in diabetes research. Today, we are diving into what it takes to train for a marathon while managing type 1 diabetes, from fueling strategies to the difference between type 1 and type 2. We'll also hear Sam's personal story, the challenges he faces, and how he stays motivated to go the distance. Adele, are you ready for this one?
Yes, 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 yes. And I have to share something with y'all real quick. Sam's story is one that I'm truly uniquely interested in because of what I've dealt with in the last 50 years of my life. But he's got his story is one that so many runners and people living with type 1 diabetes can truly relate to. Managing blood sugar levels while training for long distance running or any long endurance type fitness event is not easy. And I cannot wait to learn from Sam's experience. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. Your running journey. What inspired you to start running? And well, first of all, welcome, Sam. Welcome
Mhm.
to the show.
Thank you.
Ah,
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. I've been wanting to do this for a while with you, Victor.
Awesome. Well, let's start right in with the first question I've been wanting to ask you, your running journey. What inspired you to start running? What made you decide to take on the challenge of a full marathon?
So it's funny. I had this. I had a feeling this question was going to be like the first one to kick it off. So I'm like, man, what type of answer should I provide? I'm just going to give you the honest truth. I started running in college, and really, I just wanted to lose some weight and look good so I could go on some dates with some girls. Um,
That's a great
right? That's
the
that's not a
best.
bad
Love it.
motivator.
No,
Um,
no.
but really once I got into it, that was the initial start of it. And then as I'm sure Victor, Adele, you both know, and most endurance athletes, is it's kind of addicting, right? There's a lot of mental benefits, and for me, someone who lives with type 1 diabetes, there's the physical benefit with not with type 1. There's potential for lots of different other health complications, and just cardio exercises are a really good way to help um, offset future complications as long as we're doing it properly, right?
That's right.
Right. I think the
Awesome.
biggest thing when you say properly is that learning how to manage the fuel to keep your sugar levels as consistent as possible because you're taxing all the fuel in your body, not just because you're a diabetic runner, but because you're using all your glycogen reserves, you're using all
Hmm.
of the energy, then all the fuel you put in it. So the gas is eventually going to run out. And that's a key part of your journey, right? Is learning how to manage.
It is. To be completely honest, the running part is challenging, right? The endurance part is challenging. But I think the greatest challenge is really the blood sugar management.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually what's the most top of mind anytime that I'm going out for kind of a training session or even a race. It's not okay. How am I gonna last? How am I gonna keep my muscles happy? It's well, that's all still top of mind. It's really how am I going to make sure my blood sugars don't drop into a dangerous level? How am I managing this
Right.
properly? Because at the end of the day, I want to finish a race and I want to finish in a good time, and I want to feel successful, but I want to cross that finish line and not have to be medically assisted across the finish
Right.
line.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me
That's
ask you,
priority.
yeah, let me ask you about your half marathon training. Have you found success in managing along that particular distance?
I have. So I will say diabetes is not a one size fits all, right?
Okay.
Everybody's body is different. And how your blood sugars are affected by running, and not just running, but all activities is going to be
Mhm.
different. For me, I've learned if I'm running in the summer, I'm going to have huge tanks in my blood sugars much more quickly than if I'm out there in the cold weather. So there's a lot to kind of account for. Um, so to be honest, it's trial and error for the most part. Of course, you want to. I'm not a medical professional. Don't take any of this as medical advice. I want to call that out. Work with your endocrinologist, work with your general physician, whoever your medical expert is, if you're diabetic watching this. Um, but really, it's just been a lot of learning what works best for me.
Mhm.
I personally am not on an insulin pump, so for
Okay.
me, it's a lot of um, kind of forethought prior to the race, rather than actually in the running, in the actual half marathon.
Mhm.
That's I think paramount to
Yeah.
running with diabetes.
And that,
Right.
when you said that everybody's different and it's trial and error, one of the things we do as coaches is we always emphasize that um, it's experimentation in your training,
Mhm.
everything. And like you said, it's for even for people who don't have diabetes, you have to try stuff out because everybody's different. And there's just a few rules of thumb, but you still have to try even different nutrition. Some people have stomach issues with
Right.
Mhm.
certain gels or something like that. Now, how was your experimentation while training for your first half marathon, and that compared to what you actually did in your race?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll actually I'll talk about when I first started getting into distance. Um, I first started kind of in like that 5K distance, right?
Mhm.
More of the shorter races, and I had no issues at all, right? Because you can get done with that in 20 to 30 minutes. And
Yay!
yeah, exactly. Yay, I
Not
can.
me anymore.
So, and with that, it's a much shorter period of time, and your body's moving for shorter distances, that my blood sugars weren't affected as much, so I didn't need to think about it. It was really when I started increasing the time and the distance to, 8 miles, 10 miles, half marathon,
Mhm.
that it really started to start having these trends, that it's like, oh man, this is starting to get to me. So um, in training and for actual race day, there's a couple things I look for, right? One is, what are my numbers at the start of the race? Um,
Mhm.
while I'm always a big advocate of always staying in range, and what I mean by in range is kind of in a healthy range for blood sugar, which is between 80 and
Mhm.
like 150,
Right.
if you're in America. Um, if but for me, I always like to be higher, right? I like to start a race somewhere around like the 200s, even as high as 250 sometimes if I'm doing a long distance, because I know once I cross mile 6 or 7, I'm going to see a huge dive in my blood sugars. Um, so that's one of the big things that I like to do is my pre-race number, and even right, that leads to the days prior in what you're eating, making sure that you're eating the right carbohydrates. That's going to fuel your run, but also maintain your blood sugar levels. So lots of breads, lots of those, um, not necessarily like fruit carbs, sugary carbs, but like more of your fibrous carbs, because those are going to maintain your levels a lot better.
Mhm.
And then for me, I mentioned a little bit ago, I'm not on an insulin pump. And I think that's actually been one of my biggest challenges, is the fact that um, I don't have that regulation attached to me while I'm running. So every once a day, I take what's called a basal insulin injection, which is
Okay.
a long acting insulin that's constantly working through your body, right?
Is that something you do in the early morning hours to maintain through the day?
I actually do that at nighttime, usually
Oh,
before
okay.
bed.
Okay.
And every person's different on when they can do that, but for me, that's when I can be most consistent.
Okay. Okay.
So usually the night before a big race, I'm going to reduce that initial injection significantly or even eliminate it.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And then what I do is really try to manage my again my pre-race sugars
Mm-hmm.
to a level that once I get going, I know it's going to maintain, and then I can add some more fuel as I start getting low. And that's just how my body works, right? Everybody's going to be different.
Can you tell us
So
a little bit about how
yeah.
your
No, go ahead.
symptoms, how you feel when, how do you feel when like you mentioned mile 6, where things starts tanking? What are your
Mhm.
symptoms, and versus the numbers, compared to the numbers, how are you feeling?
Yeah. So going back to when I first started race running, I mentioned I did this in college. That was back when you still had to finger prick your
Mhm.
check
Yep.
your sugar levels, your blood
Yeah.
glucose levels. So I actually took a hiatus from running for years because of the fact that I just couldn't carry a glucometer with me constantly. It was a burden. It wasn't until the release of continuous glucose monitors or CGMs, which I've just got one that's hooked onto my arm right now,
Okay.
and I can actually, you can see on my phone right now, it
Yeah.
Right.
tells me my blood sugar in real time, which thankfully, in the time of this recording, I'm actually at a good number.
You had a good.
Um, I'm in the green.
Feeling good.
That's
So,
good.
For St.
um,
Patrick's.
yeah. So what's nice is that for me, I can feel the symptoms of low blood sugars, of hypoglycemia,
Yeah.
um, where others maybe not be able to do that. Symptom wise, for me, it's going to be a lot of shakiness, right? I'll kind of, my hands will start not being able to stand still.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel a little lightheaded, maybe dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and usually that'll start once I'm getting under like that 70 threshold for blood sugar numbers. That's when it starts to kick in, and usually about that time, it's like time to refuel. You need to get something in your body. Especially if I'm at mile 7.5 marathon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I still have a long way to go. So
Right. Right.
fueling's extremely important then.
So I'm going to ask you a quick question, and I'm actually going to defer to Victor a little bit because he's run with someone with type 2 diabetes, which I
Mhm.
think has some different issues that have to be addressed compared to an endurance athlete running with type 1 diabetes. And I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit of that. But I want to ask Victor, in response to your answer, when you get the lightheadedness, have you experienced that yourself, Victor, even though you're not a diabetic runner? Have you experienced like that low sugar type of symptom that Sam is describing?
Yeah, mine has been pretty much more after the race. I have
Yeah,
not experienced it during the race. I think Ironman, I think I had symptoms of everything,
yeah, I
but
think so.
it was
Yeah,
in some of the marathons. It's sometimes even like 30 minutes after I run the race that I start, my sugar levels just drop and
yeah,
lightheaded.
yeah.
So uh, it's one thing that I've created a habit of just making sure that I'm continuously fueling after the race and not
Mhm.
allowing them to drop. But
Right.
I
And
haven't. I'm assuming I'm making assumptions of blood sugars because I haven't tested it.
yeah. And there was a reason I asked that question, Sam, because for myself, I know exactly what your symptoms feel like. Been
Yeah.
there, done. Because I, like I said, that hypoglycemic diagnosis came at 17, and it's
Mhm.
something I've monitored now for 50 years. But for someone who's not considered a blood sugar risk in endurance athlete training, like Victor, you can still acutely experience what you're describing. And I think for our viewers, that's something very real that you just described, because once they start feeling that sense of like you, I don't know, do you start sweating, you lose focus,
Oh,
you
yeah.
get that lightheadedness? Those
Yes.
are those are really significant things for someone in the middle of a long training event or race where there usually is medical attention along the course that they should be aware of. So I really appreciate you describing those symptoms. And Victor, I know you will probably understand that because of your ex-wife who was diabetic and they run together. But I want to ask you a little bit too. As you describe your symptoms, how do you look at the difference between the type 1 and the type 2 diabetes? If you could give us maybe a general overview and then how the type 1 actually affects your continuous endurance training.
Yeah, it's when you compare the two, they're right. They're similar but different.
Mhm.
Essentially, the causation is completely different. The management is different, but the complications that come with it are essentially the same.
Mhm.
Where we're all trying to not have overly high blood sugar or overly low blood sugar. That's really what it is. It's just management. I mean, getting a little bit more medical, right? Causation, they're both somewhat genetic. Type 1 is going to be a little bit more
Mhm.
genetic. It's usually there when you're born. It just doesn't show up until sometime later in life. For me, like you, Adele, I was 17 when I was diagnosed with type 1.
Right.
Um, with type 2, usually it's going to be later onset in life. Right. It could be multiple factors, again, genetic, lifestyle, different things like that. But then how you manage it's going to be very different. I'm insulin dependent. My body does not produce insulin. Um, Essentially, what happened is my immune system attacked my pancreas. Right, it attacked all those insulin producing cells within my body, and doesn't allow me to make that myself. So I have to inject insulin
Right. Right.
all the time. With type 2, right, it's very different. There's medications that you can take. Your body essentially can still make insulin. It's just not
Mhm.
accepting that insulin. The insulin's not doing its job. So we need to give it a little bit of help. And how we do that is through diet and exercise. It's through maintaining a healthier lifestyle and with the assistance of some medications that are out there.
Right.
And there's some great ones out there. Again, I'm not a medical professional, so I can't
Yeah.
speak necessarily to that. But um, again, same issues, but just very different ways that's managed.
Right. And you said you type 1 diabetes is genetic. Generational parents, grandparents, were you anticipating a diagnosis at some point?
No, not at all.
Okay.
So my diagnosis story is a little bit unique in that it was detected very early. I was actually in for a sports physical in high school to participate in sports, and my
Hmm.
family has other chronic issues. Diabetes, not one of them.
Hmm.
So we did some blood work, and turned out my blood sugar was over 300. And they said, were you fasting? And I said, yeah, I fasted. And they're like, yeah, we think you're type 1 diabetic. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, that's awful. Um, but I will say, it hasn't, it's, I've had worse things happen. Diabetes, the silver lining with it is it has forced me to be more cognizant
Hmm.
of my health, of
Hmm.
my activities. It kind of kickstarted me from being that invincible teenager to like, I should probably be a little bit more proactive on what I'm doing. So, um, it's look at the silver lining. So, and plus, I'm part of this great organization. Victor, you called it out, Breakthrough T1D, that does a lot of research and treatments and funding towards finding a cure for this. So eventually, right, I'd love to not be diabetic anymore, but um,
Nice.
for now, it's just another challenge.
It's kind of comparing like your marathon journey. You're training for your very first marathon, and I know Victor and I actually know what kind of journey that is. I've
Mhm.
done 12. He's done Ironman, marathon, Boston. And, you know, you got to remember something too, Sam. He's a little younger than me, right? But I will tell you this. I'll share this with you that I ran my first marathon a month after I turned 40. So basically, I'm 67 now. So, and there was a reason. I was a cancer patient, cancer survivor, 10 years of
Mhm.
cancer, but also using the same platform of how I came through being a high level athlete through high school, college, childhood, everything else. But learning how to navigate the low blood sugar. And I will share this with Victor too. Being 5'1" and always wearing like a size 5 or 7 at 108 pounds,
Yeah.
getting to the end of high school and going to college, complete game changer. I'm an LSU girl, just so you know. I'm just gonna say purple and gold.
Mm,
But the changes in environment, the changes in routine, the changes in what's available was a complete learning 360, right?
yeah.
Um, I became a size 9 and 11. I weighed about 135 to 138 pounds on a
Mhm.
small frame, still doing, ranked tennis tournaments. It's still doing things, running a little bit to support the competitive tennis. The biggest thing for me was the weight changed everything regarding my blood sugar. And
Yep.
once I was able to navigate that and change my routine, being in a new environment and being on my own, it took about 2 years. And that journey, because I graduated, I was back to a size 7, 110 pounds. The beauty of that is the learning journey. And it's
Yep.
like I compare it to our marathon training journey. It's a daily, consistent, long haul.
Yep.
And what you've shared now, you're about 33, so you're not quite 20 years into your journey. You're about 18 years into your journey now.
Yep. Yep.
Have you seen life changes regarding jobs, adventures, experiences, relationships, things that your journey with diabetes has affected other than just being conscientious when you're training and running?
Oh, everything. Diabetes doesn't turn off. It is a full-time job. It's 24/7. So yeah, it's had a huge impact in my life and how I attack challenges. You know, I was literally so we were going to record this a week ago, and I had to tell we can't record today. I'm traveling. I was actually just in Washington D.C. For twofold for two reasons. One, I had a work conference there, but the other was I was advocating at the Capitol for for diabetes policy and for funding and for all sorts of things. And while I'm out there, it's I'm moving, I'm walking, gosh, I don't know, 20, 30,000 steps a day. I'm wearing a full suit and tie. It's hot, but it's also cold. And there's this whole feeling of pressure and anxiety. And the entire time that that's happening, I'm having diabetes as well. And I'm having to manage all of these different things. There's a Stanford study done. I don't know. I'll maybe see if I can dig it up, 15 years ago, where they said a type 1 diabetic makes over 170 conscious decisions every day around their diabetes.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
a
a lot.
lot.
it's pretty amazing. Everything
Yeah,
that we do, diabetes is always in the background. It's not just running and physical activities, but it's literally, I'm getting ready to go to work today. Do I have my glucose with me in case I need it? How many meetings do I have? Am I able to check my phone to see what my glucose is? Am I going to be in a position for that? So on this trip, I had probably 7 different hypoglycemic episodes.
Yeah.
So it affects everything.
yeah,
So the I'm me, Victor. I'm a very positive guy. So
yes,
I try to look at the positive side of everything. It forces you to be a little bit more proactive in all scenarios. So with marathon running, that's why I'm working with you as my coach, because
yes. And I
Got a
might
good
point out
coach
that
there.
you
Got a good
you
coach
are
there.
my first client with type 1 diabetes, and ever since you came on board, I've been doing a lot more research on it and just finding a lot. And there's so much to learn. And I know
yeah,
you just gave a speech at our Toastmasters meeting about the advocacy that you were going to do in
yeah.
Washington. And I was going to ask you how did that go?
Yeah.
It went well. There's, this is not a political conversation at all.
No, it's not gonna be.
I
I
don't
No.
want
stay
to
away
get
from
into any of that. But
Yeah.
we're in kind of an interesting kind of part in our administration. So the conversations that we're having at the Hill were very different than anything that we've ever had before. Um, so, but with that, nobody likes diabetes. Nobody
Right.
likes it. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, what your background is. Diabetes is terrible, right? Adele, you shared, right? You're a
Mhm.
cancer survivor. Nobody likes
Mhm.
cancer. Cancer's awful. So nobody listens to us and says, no, we don't want to help you. It's,
Right.
there's
Right.
support across the board. So ultimately, and I'll share that a lot of positive takeaways, a lot of support from everyone. So very optimistic about that.
I,
Awesome.
I think the advocacy in government for diabetes research, obviously you have these other new things that have come up too, has been in place for quite a while. But
Mhm.
with the technology and the scientific research that's there, there's so much more now in your generation that can be addressed. And for
Mhm.
you to be taking that role, I commend you on that because you show up one day, go through the few days you've done, dressed in a suit, know you're navigating all of your necessities with a completely different routine. The beauty of you putting that time and effort and heart and soul and compassion into that is going to save someone in the next generation from having to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the long term goal I think that you're working towards is let's take care of who's coming behind me, just like Victor coaching you. You don't want to be the last runner, but it's okay to be the last runner. You know why it
Yes.
is? Because you get to focus on everything else that's going on. But for what you're trying to achieve, you always want to have somebody behind you that you can encourage, can cheer on, and that you can advocate for. So I commend you completely on that, and would love to continue with that part of your story. If you have websites, maybe links that we can go to, Victor could maybe post some things to get information on what you're doing and how to
Absolutely.
address it.
I
Some
would
of our viewers
Yeah.
may be very interested in that.
I would
Yeah.
love to share that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll definitely put it on the show notes.
Yeah.
And also share some of the effects of stress. This because you
Oh,
mentioned traveling and being under stress. How does that affect your sugar levels?
For me, I don't know how many other people deal with this. I try to share when you get in the room with another diabetic, you just kind of nerd out and start talking about,
right.
diabetes and stuff. Um, so for me, I, the best way that I can do this is explain how I go to ski. I started skiing a couple of years ago with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not good, but I go, and she she's great. So I get very anxious. I like being on flat ground where I have breaks and I can stop. So for me, when I'm up on the hill, oh man, I can feel the anxiety. Like I get really hot and kind of sweaty and stuff. It's not diabetes related. It's just how I mentally process a lot of that. And I notice without anything else, my blood sugar skyrockets. Something in my metabolism is processing the latent sugars that are stored within my body, within my muscles, and actually raising my blood sugar. So I try to correct it. I try to take insulin to level that out, to bring it back down. And then what I find is that when I get done with skiing, when we're in the car heading back down the mountain, all of a sudden I just dive. I just plummet. And then it's like, man, I've been taking all this insulin and it's finally kicking in. And I'm like, oh man, now I need to find my gels. Now I need to find my snacks, my juice box, whatever that might be. And that's kind of how my body metabolizes all of that stress. So it's very unique, how that works.
You
Right.
have a very fast metabolism naturally, do you?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay. Because what you're doing is just making it skyrocket in its activity level, right? It's
Yeah.
like taking something to supplement it. And I'll share this with you because when you get into your senior years, depending on whether you're an athlete or not, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Things slow down, right? Your body
Sure.
droops and things slow down. That's just nature of age. But to continue keeping that metabolism operating at an efficient level is vital to someone dealing with a blood sugar illness, right? And
Yes.
the key to advanced and exaggerated metabolism like we have when we're running a half marathon or marathon or training a 20-mile run. Obviously you're going to have those lows like we've discussed. One of the things that I found, and this is something that could be very advantageous to yourself and to other people dealing with it, is the limited amount of anxiety in a new situation is, it can be a trigger on either side of that. If
Yeah.
you have exaggerated anxiety, like you sharing, or you try to limit that by, a deep breathing or monitoring how your body's reacting, it's going to keep that metabolism from skyrocketing everything else, and then everything starts generating, fist speed. That's a learning experience, and it takes years to really get there. But it's
Yeah.
something to address when you put yourself in a new experience in a new situation. Going to take a final exam for your master's is totally anxiety producing, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Been
for
there,
sure.
done. Oh, I carried the glucose and the orange juice and all the other stuff that I used to take with me. But you have to be prepared. That's the key, is to be prepared.
It is. Yeah. And I know, Victor, you'll attest to it too, right?
Oh
Yeah.
Toastmasters,
yeah,
getting up, public speaking,
Yes.
not for the faint of heart.
nope.
No, definitely not. And I've been in certain speech competitions where you're tend to have to control your heart, and you're the next next contestant up, and your heart just beating like crazy. Like, yeah, I've definitely been there, and I can compare that to some of the anxiety that I've had in racing. Although I think it's very different. I mean,
Mhm.
the anxiety is different, and where I've experienced the most is the Ironman, because you go in cold water, and I had a bad experience in the water. And cold water to me it's that shocking effect,
Yeah.
and I think that's the only part that I have that comparable anxiety, and it's that it's very difficult to try to calm yourself down while you're you're trying to swim at the same time, and it's
Yeah.
like the two don't want to jive. And let me ask you, as far as your experience, is the Windermere Marathon, which was last May, was that your last half marathon race?
Um, yeah, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That was my last official race. Yes.
Okay, that's where we saw each other. I was the pacer, and he happened to be there, and it's like,
Where I beat you.
So he paced
So
you.
that's funny. That's actually like one of my I don't know if I want to call it proudest racing moment, but I had this really cool sense of accomplishment because you were the 2 hour pacer. And
Ah,
yes,
I was standing at the start line with Victor, and you asked me, Victor, you're like, what are your goals for this race? And I'm like, I want to finish. Maybe if I beat 2 hours and 20 minutes or something, I'll be happy. And then we get to the final, I want to say like 2-3 miles, and I see
um,
you. And I'm like, I'm booking it. I'm finishing strong. Uh,
awesome.
yeah, so I think I had you beat by 3 minutes. Not that you were
Yeah,
trying as hard as you could have, and you were carrying the sign, but I still beat you.
yes, yes. Then that's a really good time. That's a very, very good time. Is there are there other races that you felt like you didn't feel so good, or your experience was that like a negative experience, or has every race been a good experience?
No, I don't want to. I don't think any race is a negative experience, regardless of how you finish and what happens on that race. How I look at it is, even if it doesn't go perfectly, it's still a learning experience, and it just means I need to go back to training, and I need to figure out how to fix it. I will say my first ever half marathon official race was uh, down in Pullman, Washington, and um, I thought I had done plenty of preparation, lots of training, and mile 11, I had already gone through the 3 gel packs that I
um,
had brought with me, and I felt my sugar just, I felt so terrible. Like, this isn't good. There was an aid station not too far away, and my goal was to just finish without stopping, without walking. And those last couple miles was, I stayed at the aid station for a while, just chugging back a couple Gatorades, just getting everything back up. And it was run walk for the last couple miles, and at the time I was disappointed in myself, and I'm like, I could have done better. I could have prepared better. but I was happy to finish it. It was my first ever half, and um, I just only gets better from there. So
Yeah,
And it
absolutely.
does. And it does. And I
yeah,
have to commend you because crossing that finish line probably took a lot more from you than now with the knowledge you have and the training you've done than
mm,
you would take out of you now. And
so
that,
much.
my friend, is the beauty of your accomplishments. And you should be extremely proud of that first one.
Thank you.
Extremely proud.
Yeah.
I
I am.
cried the last few miles back with my first marathon because it was right after turning 40, a month after my first clear diagnosis in 10 years. I didn't think I'd be around to see my kids grow up. And I just cried my eyes out and ran in the city park in New Orleans. I'm going, yeah. People thought I was crazy, but I continued doing it for the next, 100 years. But it's a beauty of knowing that you can, and
Yes.
then
Yeah.
continue finding a way to make it work better for you each time you go into it. And that's actually a good leading question. So with Victor coaching you on the skills of running, and I know Victor well enough now. He's going to bring in the mindset and all the other intangibles that go
Yeah.
into really achieving that distance and crossing that line. So your journey right now is learning that as well as the physical skills of running. And I know he's been doing some research on the nutrition and hydration specific to what you would need. So
Yeah.
y'all are actually learning a lot from each other, I would assume, right?
Yes, this is going to be a great. We've just started, and it's going to be an awesome journey. And I am curious as what goes through your mind, or do you have any kind of anxiety over training for a full marathon, or just pure excitement?
No, anxiety, definitely anxiety. I'm not gonna lie to you. You know, it's it's not. It's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a challenge with me, man. Um,
Yeah. And what is the longest miles you've run?
uh, 15 has been
15.
my
Okay.
longest.
1500.
So I've got
Yeah.
there's a little bit extra work to go there. So
Yeah. And any different symptoms from a half marathon, or no, it's not it's pretty close to a half marathon. It's still like 2 miles more.
it's pretty close. Yeah.
So
No, symptoms are pretty much the same by the like I said, the first kind of 5-6 miles, there's usually nothing to really, usually, hopefully, nothing serious starts happening. But after like 8-10, it's like, all right, now it's my body's breaking down, and I need to keep fueling constantly. So we're gonna be doing a
awesome.
lot of learning together, man. It's gonna be
Yeah, I'm
fun.
excited. I'm gonna definitely learn a lot, and I can't wait to. Do you have an idea? I know you had mentioned the Spokane Marathon.
Mhm.
Have you looked at other ones, or?
I'm gonna ask my coach for maybe some recommendations on that.
There you go.
Yeah,
Oh,
we were
There,
talking about that. We
yeah,
just
that's
had the
smart. That's
late
smart. Yeah,
late
definitely.
we just had Crystal, was the director of Light Tunnel Marathon, so that's another one
mm,
to consider in
I did
North
see that
Bend,
one.
Washington. So, yeah, we have definitely an array of choices. Spokane, when I moved into Spokane, there was only one marathon, which was the Spokane Marathon. Now you
Right.
got the Windermere, and then you got another one in Coeur d'Alene. Oh, I think Coeur d'Alene was happening because it's been happening for a long time.
Yeah.
But they have the Hayden Marathon, which is new also. But that one's even more challenging than the Spokane.
Yeah, I was gonna say Spokane is gonna be about probably the top of my limit as far as challenging courses go.
Yeah.
So maybe the light tunnel might be good, but it's not an official marathon, but um, on the other side of the country, I'm from New Jersey originally.
Oh, wow.
There's my grandfather lived on Long Beach Island, which is just a big long strip of sand on the Jersey Shore,
Okay.
and it's point to point. It's 18 miles.
Wow.
So I'm hoping, and it's nice and flat, right? It's a beach,
Oh,
so it's nice.
yeah, definitely.
So I am hoping that could be another race. It's around the same time as the Spokane Marathon, but depending on what works out, that would be also a good one. Dedicate to my grandfather who passed last year. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's another race that's been on my checklist to knock out.
It'd be a
And
great one to keep on your checklist. Yes.
Yeah.
Then you
so
could start
and
in New Orleans because it's completely flat and hot
oh
and
yeah.
perfect. I could show you where all the bathrooms are along the route.
So I will say humidity is also a big impact on the blood sugars for me, at least. I don't know, Adele, if you've had issues with
Yes.
humidity, but oof,
Right.
that's a game changer. Even for a non-diabetic, humidity is tough.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I've experienced a little bit of that because I'm doing the 50 states, and we did a few of them in the Midwest, and
Yeah.
you just soaked. I mean, you sweat anyway, almost in any half marathon or marathon, but in
Right.
those areas, like it's a lot more sweat. You got
Yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
drink more water.
Right.
I mean,
I know we're getting close to finishing our conversation with Sam, Victor, but I have one quick question for him. And I think this would be maybe a good way to close if you'd like to. What advice would you have for someone like yourself, a young man diagnosed with a daily conscientious disease that has to be dealt with no matter what you do with your life in that 24-hour? What would you advise someone to do on their journey, not only as a diabetic, but also as a runner? Anything come to mind?
um, sorry, I'm getting emotional.
It's an emotional
Yeah.
question because
It
I've
is.
been here before, my friend.
Um, it sucks. Diabetes sucks. Any chronic condition that limits you sucks.
Mhm.
But I've learned, and what I love about running is it's tangible, trackable, breaking down barriers.
Mhm.
Um, this is something I never thought I'd be able to do. I still struggle a lot of the times. There's good days, there's bad days. But at the end of the day, if you have the right mindset for it, it sounds cliche, right? You can anything is possible. You can do anything. But being here, I'm proof that you can really do anything you set your mind to, right? I'd like to maybe come back after I complete that marathon, Victor, and maybe just
Yeah,
attest to it. But
absolutely. We'd love to have you.
That's
right,
already on our agenda. It's already on our agenda. I already told him that.
yeah, don't let this be a limiting factor. It's just an extra. It's like playing on hard mode is all it is, right? I'm running on hard mode, so it's just a little bit of an extra challenge, but it's nothing you can't do if you really want to do it. So uh,
Absolutely.
I'd say start. Do the research. There's a lot of type 1 running groups on social media that you can look into if it's something that you want to learn from other experiences that are out there. um, uh, and find a good support group. I have Victor, who's awesome. I have some runners that I talk to frequently. I'm with through my advocacy work. I've been introduced to so many other diabetics and parents and people that have very unique stories and successes and failures and all of that. um, I think leads to the fact that um, really you can do anything with the right support system and the right motivation.
I think
Absolutely.
one of the biggest things that you're sharing is what you have inside of you,
Hmm.
and that you're willing to put yourself out there and live without limits, which is a quote from Steve Prefontaine. I know who you know who that is.
I'm a duck. You
Yep, yep. But it's
go
without
ducks.
limits, and then you're not saying you're living without limits. And I'm so excited to have met you, and I do hope we get you back. We get you back.
Yes. And I
I'm
want
gonna.
to just add a little something before we sum it up is that I'm going to start talking about metals and what it means. And I know this is your first one was probably the Snake River for the
Mhm.
half, and
Yeah.
now you'll have a first one for your full marathon. And I'm going to encourage more of our guests and everybody, and maybe I can bring my first medal because it's they're special. And even we sometimes people get modest about sharing their medals, but like for example, you are dedicating to your grandfather, whether it's the 18 miler or the marathon,
Mhm.
and just I want to bring that spirit of what it means to have that medal.
Right.
On the other one is what does I want to ask you? What does running your best life mean to you?
Oh man, you saving the tough questions for last.
We do that on
And
purpose. Have a guest, and we love you.
No, I love it. I love this podcast. Running my best life to me is not letting anything get in your way, not letting the challenges, if it's diabetes, if it's other personal challenges, professional challenges, while it may hinder you, it's not going to stop you. It's not going to prevent you from doing what you need to do, from living your
Absolutely.
life.
I love it. I love it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to let you two guys continue with your coaching journey, and I wouldn't mind having y'all meet with me again, maybe as we go along the journey, as you get closer to the dates. And I'm going to get you to come down and run down here and do something
Yeah.
down in this Louisiana Southern humidity, whatever you want to call it, area of mine, but it's always flat. But I know you'll come down because I told Victor he's got to come down here too. So,
I love it. If I can have some king cake, I'll bring the insulin. You bring the king
ooh,
cake.
cake, beignets, all that good stuff. I'm not a drinker, but I know where you can find a drink if you can have it. It's all sugar.
All
We'll make it
right.
work.
Thank you, everybody. And this was amazing. Thank you, Sam, for joining us. And we look forward to talking to you once we get through the full marathon or even before that. But in the meantime, everybody can comment on the
Mhm,
below on any of the topics that we discussed today.
mhm. And
And
make sure we'll have information on how to contact Victor, myself, and obviously we want to put that information for Sam's advocacy groups is there as well, and keep him tied into letting us know how he's doing on his journey for his first marathon. I'm so excited to hear about it. So I thank y'all for joining me, guys. It's been such a pleasure to chat with y'all today. And Victor, you know I love you. I'll see you next week.
thank you. Love you too. Thank you, Sam.
Bye all.